danger as if it were nothing but dust on his boots, and in that moment relief and disbelief washed over her at once, her legs trembling so badly she thought she might collapse right there. But he was already dismounting, boots crunching against gravel as he strode toward her, his coat brushing against his spurs, every movement deliberate, steady, protective, and when he reached her side, he placed a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her with strength she hadn't felt in her own body since the fear first took hold, his voice softer now as he asked if she was hurt, if the beasts had gotten to her. And though she shook her head, words refused to come, only tears spilled over, hot against her cheeks, and he nodded as though he understood everything she couldn't say. Around them the prairie stretched wide and empty, but he stood like a wall between her and the darkness, his horse stamping the ground as though restless to chase the predators away, and he guided her gently toward the saddle, insisting she ride while he led the reins. And though she hesitated, embarrassed by her weakness, his stern gaze left no room for argument. She climbed up, clutching the saddle horn as he steadied her with one strong hand, and together they began down the trail, his lantern swinging from the saddle, his rifle slung across his shoulder, his every step certain, every sense alert, the coyotes lingering in the distance but unwilling to approach again. Not with him there. She watched him in silence as they moved forward, her fear slowly replaced by awe, noticing the way he carried himself, how the weight of the world seemed to rest easy on his shoulders, and she thought about how a stranger could appear at the moment she needed most, how fate had sent her a guardian, when she had resigned herself to death, and when she finally found her voice, she whispered a trembling "thank you," but he only tipped his hat slightly, muttering, "A man does what's right," as though saving her was nothing extraordinary, just the way of things in his world. The ride back felt endless, yet also fleeting, the prairie opening around them like a sea of shadows, the cold wind carrying hints of danger that never quite dared to touch her now, not with him there. And when they finally reached the dim outline of a cabin against the horizon, she realized her body no longer trembled, realized the pounding of her heart had steadied, realized that his promise, "You're safe with me," was more than words. It was truth, carved into the night like a vow. And as he helped her down, his hand warm and steady, she looked into his eyes and saw not just the man who had saved her from the jaws of coyotes, but the man who had brought back her faith that she could survive, that the world still held protectors among its dangers. And so the night ended not with death but with salvation, not with screams but with silence broken, only by the steady voice of the cowboy who had come when she needed him most. And though she knew fear would always return in some form, she also knew she would never again forget that moment. The way a single shot and a few steady words had changed everything. The way safety had found her in the shape of a man who refused to let shadows win. And if you've been swept into this story, if you felt the fear of the coyotes closing, and the relief when the cowboy stepped into the night to protect her, then don't forget. There are more stories like this waiting for you here. More journeys through danger, courage, and hope. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and never
miss the next tale that might just remind
you what it feels like to be truly safe when everything seems lost. Quiet hours, she realized that survival wasn't just about being strong. It was about the miracle of someone standing guard when you could not. Someone who would fire into the dark without hesitation when you thought all was lost. Morning broke with the sound of birds scattering across the fields, the horizon painted with streaks of orange and gold, and she rose to find him outside already saddling his horse, the weight of responsibility still etched across his features. And when she stepped out into the crisp air, he met her gaze with a nod, asking if she was ready to ride into town, to leave the memory of last night behind. But her heart stirred at the thought of parting ways, of never seeing again the man whose voice had anchored her through terror, whose strength had become her shield. And though she could not yet find the courage to say it, she wondered if safety wasn't just about a cabin's walls or a rifle's report, but about the bond forming between two souls who had collided in the darkest hour. Yet even as the sun rose, shadows lingered at the edges of the land, and Luke warned her that the coyotes wouldn't give up so easily. That hunger made predators bold, and the memory of their eyes still haunted him too. And as they rode out together, the world stretched wide again, the prairie alive with rustling grass, the trail winding like a ribbon into the distance, and she understood that the story was not yet finished, that this was only the beginning, and that danger had not been vanquished, merely postponed. And if you've been drawn into this tale, if you want to know where fate will lead them, what dangers they'll face next, and what truths lie hidden in Luke's past, then stay close, because more is yet to come. And make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter of courage, danger, and the unexpected bond that blooms in the shadow of fear. It was a night darker than most, the kind of night where the moon hid behind thick clouds, and the stars were swallowed whole by the emptiness above, leaving the land to the mercy of shadows. And she walked alone on the dirt road that cut through the wide prairie, her footsteps quick and nervous, echoing faintly in the silence of the night as though the earth itself listened to her every move. Her shawl was pulled tightly around her shoulders, though it did little against the chill that seeped into her bones, and the weight of fear pressed on her chest as the sound began. Low, drawn-out howls that carried across the still air, a sound primal and cold, the unmistakable voices of coyotes gathering, their sharp cries rising like ghostly laughter from the grasslands around her. And every time she turned, the shapes seemed to flicker in the corner of her vision, eyes glowing faintly, bodies darting in and out of the darkness, circling closer, relentless hunters that had caught the scent of her fear. Her heart pounded faster with every step, her breath shallow, and she clutched at the small lantern in her hand, though its flame was weak and trembling, barely casting a glow beyond her boots. And the realization sank in that she was far from any cabin, far from safety, far from any soul who might hear her scream if she let it escape her throat. Yet still she forced herself forward, whispering prayers under her breath, fighting the urge to run because she knew running would only invite them to chase. Then suddenly one of the coyotes let out a piercing yelp from the left, and another answered from the right, the sound surrounding her, trapping her. And when she glanced over her shoulder, she saw them at last. Lean shadows with fur bristling, teeth flashing white in the lantern's flicker, their eyes catching the faintest light with a hungry gleam, and her legs nearly gave way beneath her, terror flooding her body like fire, her mind racing to every story she'd heard about travelers torn apart on lonely trails, her lips forming a whisper of "Please God" as her knees shook. She thought this was the end, thought her family would never know what happened to her out here, thought her life would end in those jaws in the silence of night until the crack of a rifle split the air, sudden and fierce, echoing like thunder rolling across the prairie, and one of the coyotes yelped in pain before the pack scattered back into the brush, snarling, confused, their glowing eyes retreating into the tall grass. And before she could even process what had happened, a voice followed the gunshot, deep and steady, carrying authority that cut through the night. "You're safe with me." She turned, her breath catching, and there he was, atop a broad chestnut horse, tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the night breeze, rifle still smoking in his hand, his eyes calm but fierce under the brim. The night might have ended with the sound of the rifle shot scattering the coyotes, but for her, the echo of fear still clung like smoke. And though the cabin's light flickered in the distance, promising warmth and safety, she couldn't shake the image of those glowing eyes watching from the grass, the memory of sharp teeth glinting in the weak lantern light. Yet beside her the cowboy's presence remained steady, a living reminder that danger had been pushed back. And when he guided her inside the small, wooden cabin with its rough-hewn walls and the faint smell of pine smoke, she realized how close she had been to being lost forever, how quickly life could turn in the wilds where no one was there to hear a cry for help. And she sank into a chair near the hearth as he stoked the fire to life, the flames crackling with an energy that seemed to chase away the shadows, lingering in her heart, his voice low but commanding as he told her she'd be safe now, that nothing would reach her so long as he stood watch. She studied him in the glow of the fire, really seeing him for the first time now that the darkness no longer swallowed him whole, his weathered face lined with stories unspoken, his eyes calm yet burning with a fire of their own. The strength in his broad shoulders that spoke of years spent riding, working, fighting when he had to, and though he said little, every word carried the weight of a man who had lived by them, and for the first time in years she felt trust bloom where fear had once rooted itself deep, her voice finally breaking free as she asked his name, her tone small and hesitant like a child testing the silence. "Call me Luke," he said simply, as though names didn't matter much out here, as though the act of saving her life spoke louder than any introduction, and she whispered her own in return, her heart fluttering when he repeated it softly. like he was making a promise to remember it. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the fire and the restless pawing of his horse outside. And then she dared to ask why he was there on that lonely trail, why fate had placed him at her side at the very moment when death had drawn its circle around her. And he chuckled low, shaking his head as if the answer was more ordinary than she could imagine, saying he'd been riding back from a ranch across the plains, his instincts pulling him toward the sound of danger, and though he said it casually, she couldn't ignore the way his hand brushed against the rifle. Leaning by the door, how his eyes flicked toward the window as though always searching for threats, always ready. That night, though she was safe inside, she found sleep elusive. Lying on the cot he had prepared for her while he remained awake, sitting in a chair with his hat pulled low, rifle across his knees, a sentinel in the flickering firelight, and when her eyes closed she dreamed of glowing eyes in the grass, only to wake and see his silhouette steady as stone, and in those,